It was early spring when I found the note, folded neatly beneath a stone, damp from the morning rain.
The handwriting was careful, deliberate, almost trembling. It was signed with a name I had not heard spoken aloud in 25 years, my father's. I had returned to my hometown only to sell what was left of the past, an empty house, a quiet graveyard, and a name that no longer felt like mine. My mother had been gone for a decade, yet the town still whispered about the night she died, the husband who disappeared, and the child who left without saying goodbye. I told myself I came back for closure, but when I saw the note pressed against her grave, I realized the past had been waiting for me all along. The cemetery was quieter than I remembered. Even the wind seemed hesitant, moving only enough to stir the damp petals scattered over the graves. I had come early, before the church bell rang, before anyone else could see me there. My mother's name was carved shallowly into stone, the letters fading where the rain had kissed them for 10 long years. I placed a handful of lilies at the base of her headstone and brushed the dirt from my knees. That was when I noticed it, a small, folded piece of paper pinned beneath a flat, river-worn stone. It was too deliberate to be a coincidence. The paper was soft, nearly melting in my fingers as I lifted it. Inside were 4 words, written in careful, almost trembling script. I finally forgive you. My first thought was that it must be a mistake, someone else's letter, misplaced by the wind. But then I saw the handwriting, looping and steady in a way that pulled a buried memory from the back of my mind. I had seen those letters before on old birthday cards, grocery lists, the notes my father used to leave on the kitchen counter before he disappeared. For a long moment, I could not move. My breath caught in my throat as if the air itself had turned heavier. My father had been gone for 25 years. No body was ever found, just an empty car near the riverbank and a closed investigation. And yet this note was here, now. Who had written it? And why leave it on her grave after all this time? The key still fit, though the lock groaned in protest, as if the door itself had forgotten the sound of being opened. The scent hit me first. Dust would rot, and something faintly sweet beneath it, like old perfume trying to outlive time. I stood in the doorway for a long while listening. Houses like this have their own kind of silence, one that hums just loud enough to remind you it remembers. The hallway walls were yellowed with age, the wallpaper curling like old paper left in the sun. My mother's coat still hung by the door, its pockets heavy with lint and memory. In the kitchen, a single mug sat upside down on the counter. I hadn't been here in 10 years, but that mug, chipped along the rim, had always been my father's. I turned it over, and a ring of dust circled the counter like a clock that had stopped mid-tick. The feeling in my chest was not quite fear, but something close, an ache that pulsed with familiarity. The chairs were where they had always been, the curtains half drawn, the light falling exactly the way it used to in the late afternoons of my childhood. It felt as though the house had been waiting, not for me, but for someone else to return first. I ran my hand along the table where my mother used to write her grocery lists. There was a faint indentation in the wood, shaped like a pen's pressure. Beneath it, something dark, a small burn mark, circular and deliberate, as if someone had pressed a cigarette there, long after she was gone.
Someone had been here. Recently. But who would come back to a house that had nothing left to offer except ghosts? It was late afternoon when I returned to the cemetery, the air thick with the scent of rain-soaked grass. The light had turned that soft, golden color it only gets before dusk, the kind that makes everything look like a memory. I was setting the flowers straight when I noticed him. A man stood by the far fence, tall and still, his coat buttoned all the way to the throat despite the warmth. He wasn't visiting any grave that I could see. Just standing there, eyes fixed on my mother's headstone as if he'd been waiting for me to turn around. When our eyes met, he gave a faint, courteous nod, the kind small-town strangers give when politeness masks curiosity. "Did you know her?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. He smiled, or something close to it. "Everyone knew her," he said quietly. "Back then." The words carried a weight I couldn't name. There was something about his voice, calm, careful, but worn thin around the edges. I noticed the watch on his wrist, old, silver, its face cracked in one corner. My father had one just like it. Before I could speak again, a gust of wind stirred the leaves and he stepped back from the fence. "She loved lilies," he said softly. "They always said they made the world feel cleaner." Then he turned, walking toward the road with a slow, deliberate pace. I called out, asked his name, but he didn't answer. Only when he was gone did I realize something strange. There were 2 sets of footprints in the mud leading up to my mother's grave. His, and another pair, smaller, older, already fading into the earth. Has he been here before? Or had someone else come with him? The attic door stuck halfway, swollen with years of damp. When I finally forced it open, a breath of stale air rolled out, thick with dust and moth wings. My flashlight cut through the dark, catching fragments of another life, a broken mirror, a trunk of old linens, and boxes stacked in careful disorder. In the far corner, under a sheet that had yellowed with time, I found a small wooden box wrapped in oilcloth. My mother's handwriting was on the tag, "For when it is time." My hands trembled as I unwrapped it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to her in my father's handwriting. None had been opened. The envelopes were sealed, edges soft from age, their paper faintly smelling of smoke and ink. I opened one. The words inside were tender, ordinary, talk of weather, the house, and how he missed her laugh. But the further I read, the more the tone shifted. The last few letters grew shorter, the handwriting uneven, desperate. The final one stopped my breath altogether. It was dated 2 days before my mother died. The ink bled slightly, as if written in haste, and the last line read, "I know what you did." The letters slipped from my hands, scattering across the attic floor like fallen leaves. I sat there for a long while, listening to the wind rattle against the roof, trying to understand what he could have meant.
The railway bridge sat just beyond the edge of town, where the road dissolved into gravel and the air smelled faintly of rust and river water. I hadn't been there since I was a child, since the night flashing lights painted the water red and blue, and my mother told me not to look. Now, decades later, I stood there again, the boards creaking under my feet, the same cold wind threading through the gaps. He was already there. The man from the cemetery. The same long coat, the same cracked silver watch glinting in the dim light. He didn't seem surprised to see me, only tired, like he had been expecting this moment all along. "You came," he said quietly, eyes fixed on the river. I asked him who he was. His name. His connection to my parents. But he didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping, dated the week my father disappeared. Local man presumed dead after car found abandoned near bridge. Beneath the headline was a photo of my father. The man's hand trembled as he held it out to me. "I was there that night," he said. "I thought I could stop it." The words hung between us, heavy with something unfinished. I wanted to ask what he meant, but he looked away toward the water, his voice barely more than a breath. "Your father wasn't the only one who disappeared that night." He left before I could say another word. I stood alone on the bridge, the wooden planks creaking beneath me, wondering what truth had drowned there and how much of it was about to surface. The details had always been blurred, softened by time and by the stories I had told myself to survive. But now, piecing together whispers and old records, the night my mother died began to take shape, sharper, colder, and far less accidental than I remembered. The police reports called it a simple misstep, a tragic fall near the railway bridge. But there were details they never mentioned. An old neighbor told me about 2 sets of tire tracks found by the bridge that night, one leading away from the water, another leading toward it. The second car had vanished without a trace, leaving only a smear of mud and the echo of hurried footsteps. No one ever asked questions, and no one ever returned to search. My mother's death had been wrapped neatly in explanation, but the edges were frayed, the truth peeking through. I imagined her walking down the fog-laden road, the wind tugging at her coat, heart pounding with fear or desperation. And then the sudden, sharp silence that came after. My father's disappearance, her fall, the stranger in the photograph, it all felt connected, like threads pulled taut across years of lies and half-truths. A week later, a plain envelope arrived at my door. No return address. No name. I almost didn't open it, the weight of the past already pressing heavily on my chest. Inside was a torn half of the same note I had found on my mother's grave. The missing words, revealed only now, read, "I finally forgive you for telling him." I dropped the note onto the table, heart hammering. The ink was the same familiar loop of my father's handwriting, but the meaning was suddenly different. The forgiveness I had hoped for, longed for, was not mine. But whose was it? And would I ever understand the part one played in it? While digging through old town records at the library, I stumbled upon a map of the property my mother once owned. There, sketched faintly in pencil, was a small square labeled simply, well, sealed 1995. That was the year my father vanished, the year my mother died. The memory of the attic, the letters, the photograph, and the note pressed like stones against my chest. Something about the timing felt deliberate, almost orchestrated. I walked to the back of the house that afternoon, the overgrown garden brushing against my legs. Where the well had once gaped, there was now a shallow mound of earth and moss-covered stones. The wind whispered across the lawn, carrying a faint metallic scent, rust or blood, I couldn't tell. I knelt beside the mound, pressing my fingers against the damp earth. The stones were uneven, slightly disturbed, as if someone had been digging or hiding something. I thought of the letters, the photograph, the stranger's words at the bridge. Every clue pointed to this moment, this place. As I stood there, the weight of the past pressed down on me. Memories flooded back, each one sharper than the last. I could almost hear their voices, echoing in the silence. The well was more than just a structure. It was a tomb of secrets. I knew I had to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger. As night fell, shadows danced around me. I felt eyes watching from the darkness. The air was thick with tension, every sound amplified. I took a deep breath and approached the well. What lay beneath was a mystery waiting to be unraveled. I was ready to face whatever awaited me. As I peered into the darkness, a glimmer caught my eye. It was a key, rusted but unmistakable. The key held the promise of answers long sought. With it, I could unlock the secrets of my past. The journey was just beginning, but I was ready. The secrets of the sealed well would finally be revealed.